What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. It's time for the top 10 disappointments of the first half of the 2022 college football season. Earlier today, I gave you my 10 surprise teams. If you missed that video, go back and check it out. Now we're looking at those teams that have been disappointments so far this season, at least in the first half, and then we'll look ahead to the second half to see which teams might be able to turn it around. So we're going to start at number 10, Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech 2-4. This is a team that I thought could be maybe even a dark horse team in the Coastal Division, and they've been just terrible. I mean, this team has been terrible. Just not able to get it going at all. I'm a bit surprised by them. Most of the teams on this list I'm not surprised with, because a lot of them I did have as being overrated in the preseason, but I did think Virginia Tech would be better. You know, they did beat Boston College. They bounced back after that loss to Old Dominion and played really well against Boston College. Beat them 27-10, but then they got blown out by West Virginia, North Carolina. They lost to Pitt. And you look into the future, Miami, NC State, Georgia Tech, who's playing better, Duke, who's been a surprise, a pretty tough Liberty team, and then Virginia. It's going to be very, very tough for this team to make it to a bowl game. I think that they will continue to be a disappointment. And again, I don't see a chance really for them to get to a bowl game. I just don't think it's going to happen. All right, number 9, Arkansas. Arkansas is actually right where I thought they would be at this point, but I know a lot of people had them much higher, and I'm doing this list based off of just kind of the overall expectations for these teams, not necessarily me personally. But yeah, Arkansas has a very tough schedule. It's just a really tough schedule, one of the toughest in the country. I had them losing to A&M, Alabama, and Mississippi State. I had them losing all 3 of those games, and so I'm not really surprised, but there are some that thought this could be a team that could challenge Alabama, that this could be a team that could maybe get to a New Year's Six bowl or something like that. I still think that they can possibly have a really good season. I don't know about a New Year's Six bowl, but when you look at the rest of their schedule, I think they're going to finish strong if KJ Jefferson is back and healthy, and I believe he is expected to play against BYU. I think this team can beat BYU, Auburn, Liberty, LSU, all winnable games. They'll have a tough one against Ole Miss, and then they have Missouri. So the back half of the schedule definitely eases up for Arkansas, and I think at the end of the year they won't be looked at really as a disappointment. Maybe a little bit of a disappointment from some people that thought that they would do better, but you know, this is a team that can absolutely get to 8-4. I think that's very doable. They're still, though, first half 3-3, not really what a lot of people were expecting from Arkansas. Number 8 is Nebraska. I know they've turned it around a little bit the last couple of games, but when you look at their schedule, their first 6 games, a lot of people thought that this is a team that could maybe be 6-0 or 5-1 at this point. 3-3, not so good. It all started with Northwestern, of course, and losing to Georgia Southern. That is rough. That is rough. Expected to lose to Oklahoma in the preseason, although now, if you look at Oklahoma, you have to wonder, how did Nebraska even lose that game? Because the Sooners are terrible. They did bounce back and beat Indiana and Rutgers, so getting back on track here, but still a major disappointment at 3-3. Of course, Scott Frost got fired, and we all know all of that. So, yeah, disappointing season so far for Nebraska. I still think there's time for them to turn it around, though. I really believe that they could even win the West. They're not my pick right now, but it could happen. The division is wide open. They're probably going to need to beat Purdue. Their next game is against Purdue on the road. That is probably a must-win. They can beat Illinois and Minnesota at home, potentially. Iowa's a winnable game. Wisconsin a winnable game. They do play Michigan on the road. But still, you're looking at a team that can get to a bowl game, maybe even get to a 7-5 record, and it won't be a huge disappointment for them. I think just getting to a bowl game, you'll look back and say, well, this season wasn't too big of a disappointment, but I know Husker fans want a lot more than that. Number 7 is Houston. Houston is sitting here at 3-3. This was a preseason top 25 team, a team that a lot of people thought could maybe make it to a New Year's Six bowl, and they've lost 3 games already. Lost to Texas Tech. I think I had them losing that game. I think I had them winning the rest of their games, though. They lost to Kansas, who turned out to be better than expected, obviously. And then they lost to Tulane. So, yeah, it's been pretty rough for Houston so far. They beat Memphis last week by 1. The schedule does really, it sets up well the rest of the way. Navy, South Florida, SMU, Temple, East Carolina, SMU and East Carolina on the road. Those will be tough games. So yeah, I don't see them running the table, but there is a chance that maybe they could win out and maybe get this thing turned around. And they only have the one conference loss, so there's still time for Houston to not have a terrible season. But I think with 3 losses already, it's going to be looked at as a disappointment, and definitely the first half has been a disappointment. Number 6 is Iowa. Iowa also has been disappointing so far. This is a team that I wasn't expecting a whole lot from this year. When you just look at their offense and the issues that they have on that side of the ball, I could kind of see this one coming. But yeah, 3-3, really rough start. Surprised that they lost to Iowa State at home. That was definitely a big one. I expected this team to be 4-2, maybe 5-1 at this point. I didn't expect. Well, actually, I picked them to beat Michigan. I had them beating Michigan and losing to Illinois, so I actually got the Illinois game right. But they really weren't all that competitive against Michigan. And again, the offense is just terrible for this team. The defense is great. They've got a really good defense, but you got to be able to score points. And a 3-3 start, that's not going to get it done, especially when you still have Ohio State on the road, Purdue on the road, Minnesota on the road. Pretty tough schedule the rest of the way. I could see this team missing out on a bowl game. I really could. I think they probably get 3 wins. You've got some winnable games. Northwestern, Wisconsin's at home, Nebraska's at home. They'll probably find a way to win 2 or 3 more games, but possibly not even making it to a bowl game. That would be a big disappointment for Iowa, a team that a lot of people thought would be in the running in the Big Ten West. Also thought Wisconsin, boy, I tell you what, Wisconsin was one of the most overrated teams coming into this year, and I actually called this one. I said that Wisconsin is not. I mean, we had people putting them in the top 10, maybe even in the college football playoff. I said preseason, this team is not going to be that good. Now, they're probably worse than I even expected them to be at this point. They fired their head coach. But yeah, it's been a disaster so far for Wisconsin. Major disappointment. You look at their season so far, losing to Washington State. That was a tough one. Losing to Illinois. They got blown out by Illinois. They did get back on track and beat Northwestern last week. I think this Michigan State game coming up is going to be the swing game for them. If they can win that, I think they could bounce back and have a pretty good year. But they still have Iowa on the road, Nebraska on the road, Purdue, Maryland, and Minnesota. Pretty tough schedule. So just like Iowa, there's a chance that they don't even make it to a bowl game. But I think this Michigan State game, if they win it, then the season will be okay for them. They won't be a huge disappointment. If they lose that game, they're in big trouble. I think it's going to be a really, really disappointing year for Wisconsin at the end of the season. Number 4, Texas A&M. I talked about this team over and over and over again about how I thought they were overrated, and they have proven to be overrated. A lot of people had them in the top 5. I mean, it's just crazy. Why were people, I'm wrong on teams sometimes, but it seemed like everybody was high on Texas A&M, and I didn't understand it. Now, I had them losing to Miami and beating App State, but the record, I had them at 3-3 at this point. So I'm not surprised with where Texas A&M is. All the issues that they've had are issues that I could see coming. But a lot of people, again, had this team much, much higher, and 3-3, not a good start for a team with back-to-back amazing recruiting classes. It's time's running out for Jimbo Fisher. Next year, if they don't get something done, it's going to be pretty bad. But you look at the rest of the schedule, they got South Carolina on the road. That could be a tough game. Ole Miss, Florida, Auburn on the road, a winnable game for sure. UMass, and then LSU at the end. Texas A&M is in danger of not making it to a bowl game. I think they probably squeak out 6 wins, but it could be, even at 6-6, that is a disappointing year. And this has been one of the more disappointing teams in college football this year. Even worse than I expected them to be. And again, I did expect them to not be as good as everyone else. So 3-3 for the Aggies. Number 3, all right, the top 3 are teams that I missed on. I missed on them. I think most people did miss on them. Michigan State, number 3 at 2-4. This is a shocker. I thought this team was going to be closer to the top of the Big Ten than to the bottom, but it's been opposite. I mean, it's been opposite. They've been arguably the worst team in the Big Ten. Maybe not the worst. Maybe Northwestern's worst, but it's been rough. It has been a rough season. You go back to, the first 2 games were good for them against easy opponents, but they got beat. Really, they got handled by Washington. That game was not close. Minnesota beat them 34-7. Maryland won easily. Ohio State blew them out, which was to be expected. It's been a rough start for them, at least based on the record at 2-4. And you look at the rest of their schedule, they're just like Wisconsin. This is a huge game coming up for both of these teams. If they can beat Wisconsin, maybe there's time to turn it around because they still have winnable games against Illinois, Rutgers, and Indiana. But they also have Penn State and Michigan on the schedule. So it seems to me like this team, it's unlikely that they make it to a bowl game. So a team that I thought was going to be, a 9-3 type team, they are in danger of not even making it to a bowl game. And Miami, all right, I missed this one. I missed on Miami. I still think the potential is there for this team, but it just has not come together for them. We saw against North Carolina, Tyler Van Dyke starting to play like the guy we saw last year, but overall as a team, they are really struggling. I still go back to the Texas A&M game, and I feel like if they had been a little bit more aggressive, they could have won that game. But losing that game, I think that there was a hangover there. They lost to Middle Tennessee, and then they had opportunities against North Carolina, couldn't get it done, and all of a sudden this team is sitting there at 2-3. Still a chance to win the division, but they're going to have to get it going here. I mean, you cannot lose to Virginia Tech. Then they've got Duke, Virginia. Florida State will be very tough. Clemson will be very tough. North Carolina might be the favorites now in the Coastal Division. As crazy as that seems, we thought it was going to be Pitt or Miami. But yeah, Miami, very disappointing. I picked them to go to the playoff. I realized that was a stupid pick. I took a risk. I really just didn't have a feeling about a fourth team. And you looked at the coaching staff that they had assembled, the returning production. They have a pretty talented roster. Tyler Van Dyke finished last year like one of the better quarterbacks in the country. But it, again, just has not come together for them, and they've been a major, major disappointment. Number one, though, has to be Oklahoma. I mean, this was a team that you had some people calling a dark horse playoff contender in the preseason. I picked them to win the Big 12, not to go to the playoff, but I did pick them to win the Big 12 in a conference that I knew was going to be wide open, but I just thought they'd be the team that would come out of there with an improved defense and a lot of weapons back on offense, and it just didn't happen. I mean, it's not going to happen. They're not going to win the Big 12 unless we see chaos. But it's not just the fact that they're 3-3. 3-3 is one thing. You look at the schedule, you could look at it reasonably in the preseason and say, okay, I can see how they could be 3-3. Texas is a toss-up. TCU on the road is going to be tough. They could lose to a Nebraska or Kansas State. 3-3 is not crazy, but it's been the way that they have lost these games. Kansas State, I know it was a 7-point game, but Kansas State looked like the better team. TCU dominated. Texas dominated. This Oklahoma team is awful right now. I have no idea how they beat Nebraska 49-14. Looking back at that game, I know they had just fired Scott Frost, and maybe that played into it. But Oklahoma has a lot of issues. They need to get Dylan Gabriel back at quarterback. That'll help. But you look at the rest of the schedule: Kansas, Iowa State, Baylor, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, and Texas Tech. That's not a murderer's row. That's not a brutal schedule. There is a chance for them to win really all of those games if they can get things turned around and start to play better football. So I think this team will at least get to a bowl game, but I don't see them winning out. I don't see this team going 9-3, maybe a 7-5 record if they're lucky. But I do think that I would say 6-6 or 7-5, but that will still be looked at as a disappointment. And again, I would say Oklahoma has been the biggest disappointment of 2022. Would love to get your thoughts. Who do you think is the most disappointing team? Maybe there's a team that's been a disappointment to you that I left off the list. Let me know who you think that team would be, the team that maybe should have made the list. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football Channel.